I loved and hated the Soon Y. Warren workshop. Now, hated is a strong word, and I have to tell you, this had nothing to do with her. She was marvelous. This more had to do with one particular technique that I just didn't like. So today in this video, we're going to go through a painting using her techniques. Step number one, of course, is the drawing. Soon recommended using a digital projector. She looked up 3 to 4, and they were in the $50 to $70 range. She also recommended using transfer paper or a light table for your drawings. Soon is basically a frisket queen. It was a little overwhelming at times, but the way that she ended things up, it didn't really look frisketed. She used this little fine line applicator. When you put this frisket on, don't squeeze. I'm looking at my picture a little bit and I'm putting in some of the places where the detail was. And you can get little blobs, but because it sparkles, it doesn't matter. And in here, there's a bunch of little wavy things. There's straight lines. And then along the bottom, there's some big sparkles. And you can just go any direction. You don't really have to. Oops, I got a blob there. I squeezed. Sort of force of habit. Now up here, there's also a water line, which I forgot to draw in. But I want the water line, so I'm going to frisket it. And it got some blobs in it, but it's okay. You don't want everything perfectly even. You can go fast at this. So some of these, in my reference photo here, some of these cut glass areas don't sparkle, but I'm going to put them in anyway because I want them to show up. I think that about does it. And then we need to wait for it to dry because we can't do any painting till it's dry. You put your frisket away by sticking the needle back in that hole. And if it goes really hard, whoa, I'm going to probably have to use some Goo Gone on that. If you're not confident to move fast, you can do frisket with some other way. There's several ways. I have some videos about that. I'll put them in the description. When you store this, you need to lay it on its side or upside down because otherwise the needle gets clogged. But she told us if the needle gets clogged, you can use Goo Gone, and it'll take about 20 minutes to unclog the needle, but just put some in there and let it sit, and it works like magic. She also said she rescued a piece of clothing using Goo Gone. I've used it too. It's great for all kinds of stuff, like getting tape off of papers and labels off of jars and so on. Well, I did the whole next section without hitting record. So I'm going to sort of go over it so that you can see what to do. I mixed my 2 yellows for the yellow highlights, and she always starts with yellow highlights. And I made them really watered down like this so that it's like thinner than skimmed milk. And I just put it everywhere where there's green, which is the stems, and everywhere where there might be a highlight. And then the next color you highlight with is pink, and I used Quin Rose for that. And I put it pretty much everywhere too. I mean, not everywhere. It's not on top of the yellow necessarily. Soon doesn't want you to leave any white. That white just doesn't need to be there. The frisket will leave some white, but mostly we'll cover that up too and make it more subdued. Although I wouldn't ever call her painting subdued. Then you dry it before you go on to the next stage. And now we're going to go into the next set of colors. Soon said that blue robs color. I didn't really believe her, but then I lost some of the sparkle on my vase because of it. I am going to get some blues, and mostly I'm putting those where they kind of are in the picture with the box that I have. I don't want this to be dark yet. Maybe a bigger touch than that. Oops, but that's okay. One of the things that really impressed me that Soon said is, if you are afraid and you aren't bold, and your paintings look like everybody else's, your paintings will never stand out. And put some pinks in places that I wouldn't have thought of putting pink. And I'm going to put some blues where there would be greens. And down here, there is some blues because it's the deep shadow of the thick part of the glass at the bottom. Now this is getting more interesting, and I'm even going to put some blues, and I don't want it to take over. I'm mostly putting it where there's shadows, even though I'm putting a brighter blue than it will end up. The next step is to add the first layer of the background, which is black. It's best to dry your paper first before you do the black so it doesn't spread into any wet parts of your painting. I'm going to use a pretty soft brush. And I'm not making my own black, but I am going to mix my black. And this is just first coat. Now you want to just, go in a pattern that's not going to make streaks and lines. And then when you get close to the edge, you go against the edge, but you quickly get rid of any streaks and lines. You don't worry about this not quite being thick enough because there's going to be another coat. So you can see that this isn't going to be as solid as it needs to be. And after we're all finished, all the friscuits off, then the final step is to put the last coat on. And that'll make it totally black, although there were people in the class that really loved the kind of variegated look that this made, and they didn't put that last coat on, they just left it that way. You do your black, you want to mix enough to do the whole background because especially if you're mixing your own black, but even this way where I mix several colors with my black, you want it to all be the same color. The slower you are at painting, the more important it is to keep the streaks from happening. I turn my paper so that my hand is facing the way that's comfortable to get the cleanest edge. I didn't make enough black. Even though I was telling you that you better make enough black, I didn't make enough. And so I'm just going to finish this out and thin the paint down that I have left. And then when I put my second layer on, I'll go thicker in this corner. Everything's dry, and now we want to get some of the shading in. We want some of the darker colors. So I'm going to get some of my Payne's Gray out here and mix it with the blue because I don't want to go into the grays yet. But I just want some darker colors. There's some dark colors in here. Make it look 3D. I'm going to water that down because I don't want that dark of a color in too many places until the very end. But I want this glass to look round. Everything you need to make this project is in the description and is listed so that you can find what you need to do this project if you want to. So I'm a little bit defining the water line up there. We have two water lines in this. We have the front one and the back one. And I think that some purples might be in order for the water line. We go right over top of the green. So it's looking like a rainbow right now, but it won't. When we put the blacks in, that's the final shading, and it takes away the rainbow look. Unless you want the rainbow look, that's fine too. Even the green, I'm going to do a little bit of shading, but mostly I'm not going to worry too much about shading until the final layer of paint. And now we're going to get into some darker colors into the flowers themselves. But not the detail, just the basic color. And you take water and soften your edges. This has less yellow, this last one, and it actually has some pinks that even show in the photo. I'm going to put them in here. So, and then you just keep adding layers of your colors. Get your shading done that way. But we're not going all the way dark yet because we're going to be doing the final blacks at the end. Soften that edge. I want this to look like a soft transition, not sharp. And now we're going to go into the cloth. And I'm just going in and putting shadows where I see shadows. Not going to worry about the bits of lace yet. And we want all of these same. And then this back here is all a bit more subdued. I don't want that edge, even though I have frisket back there, I don't want that edge to be so sharp. The rest of the shading I do on this cloth will be blues and grays. At this point, it's really good to walk away, put it across the room from you, or stand it up where you're working and just look at it for a while and glance back and forth at your photo and see what areas need to get darker in order to make this thing look 3D. But we're going to add black at the end, so that will help with the 3D. And we're soon coming to the part that I really, really didn't like about her class. And when we do, I will tell you. I want some purple in here for some of this shading. Which instantly turned brown with that. It's quite dark in there, but I don't want to lose all of that yellow. And then right under this lip, it also gets fairly dark. Just a little bit, not spread down very far. If you're feeling like yours isn't getting dark enough, then don't stress, because there is another step coming up. One of the things that Soon talked to us about is her favorite brushes. In fact, she endorses them and they use her pictures, and that's Silver Black Velvet. And so I bought a number 8 and a number 12, and so far I've painted this entirely painting with those two brushes, and I really do love them as well. This one has some interesting shading. Comes down in a curve down over there, then it's just up on the lip, and then comes down in a curve across here. And then there's another curve down here, which might be better to wait to put that one in until you've softened all the edges on these. Using a dark blue, but it's very watered down, so it's actually looking a bit gray. And then this goes into some yellows in here. A bits of blue, too dark. So I'll spread those out. This one doesn't have a lot of shading. It's very light, just up in here. Okay, one more thing that I want to do before I start adding my blacks, and that is with the shading part of this, is to put some more color at the sides to make it look 3D, some more gray. Don't want to leave much white in here. Soon says don't leave any white. Never ever leave white. That's her philosophy. And after that, we're going to take off the frisket. Okay, before you take the frisket off, be sure that it is totally dry, or it will tear your paper. Make sure you feel it, and if there's any spots that feel cool to you, then they still are wet. I like to use this frisket eraser, And the kind of frisket I used is called the Incredible White Mask, and it is basically my favorite one. However, Soon Y. Warren recommended that you use Winsor Newton's with the yellow in it so that you can see where it is. And it was at this step that we all looked at our paintings and went, oh dear, too much white, such rough edges, didn't like it. Especially those of us who are more direct painters and only use frisket in little bits. You can tell it's off by rubbing your hand over it. If there's some you've missed, you'll instantly feel the raised bump. And if you don't get it all, it doesn't look very nice when you paint over it. The next thing we do is sort of how we started, with pale yellow and just highlights. And she called it chicken scratch. You just do little scratchy shapes with your brush. And we do the same thing with pink, just like we did with that first layer. And we get some pinks into our sparkles. Now comes the part that I hated. I'm going to show it to you. I'm not necessarily going to use it. In order to get the final shadowing in, Soon use this marker, or you can use a brush with black ink. And she went into different areas and made squiggly lines. So this is the painting that I did in her class. And if you look carefully, I'll hold it up, you can see that there's black lines in here. Now, they were much blacker than that, and because I didn't like it, I washed them out. But then it did take some of the brightness out of the shine along here. And so I prefer to use a dark blue and a brush. You do squiggly lines, and it mimics the glass. You do it all over. So you can see why this might be easier with a marker. All right, I'm going to just show you the marker. It is easier. The more detail you put into these, the more intricate the glass looks. So I'm going to go from there into some blues because I don't want the whole thing to get so black. Although it's much harder to do this with a brush. Then there's just a little bit of dark right along this waterline. Goes underneath in some places and on top in some places. Can't help myself. I have to wash that black out just a little bit. I think if I could find a dark blue marker that I'd be more thrilled with that. Now we'll get some darker green than I've had out here before and put some detail into these stems. Now this I want to almost go away in the back. Just want there to be a suggestion of those dots that were there. I'm not even worrying about this stuff. Just covering right over that white. So this lace, this cloth was all lace, and I didn't want to put all lace because it's not that kind of painting where you put every detail. Just give the impression of details. At this point, I'm gonna just put it back a little bit and just look at it. And I always hate my cloth in between, but I'm used to making things look realistic as they go. But that isn't what this class was like. But it did end up looking like a basically realistic painting when it was done. My flowers are too light, and so I'm gonna go over them. The next thing that we did was scrubbing, and the scrubbing makes the frisket lines disappear. Now for a scrub brush, so I used these two. This one is a really stiff scrub brush. It's actually called a scrub brush, a silver scrubber angle. This is also a silver scrubber angle, but I trimmed mine so that it wasn't quite so fat and quite so blunt. And I didn't use this one. And then this is an acrylic brush that's soft, and I also trimmed it and made it short so that it scrubs. And the way that we made this flower blend together is by scrubbing. And you just scrub at the edge of the frisket and get those edges softened. You have to keep rinsing your brush, drying it off on your sponge. And if there's any whites that you've lost, you can get them back with these too, especially this stiffer one. For those of you who are direct painters, this feels a little bit backwards from what you usually do. So see how much softer the flowers are getting. It helps to have a tissue actually, or a paper towel or a cloth. And put in some detailing with more realistic colors. I want this to pop forward, this part right here. And so I need some darker color behind it. Some of you are going to go, that's how I would have painted it in the first place. Well, yeah, me too, but this was also very effective. And it did make, we created a lot of beautiful work. The whole class had quite a bit of success. Now I've got some watered down paint for this. I'm going to get some of these lines in that give it direction. Now we're going to get some directional lines in this part too. We start up here. And again, this one has a darker lip under here. Every now and then you need to stand back from it because it starts to all look wrong, or it starts to look right when it's not, one or the other. Now part of finishing this is deciding what color is under there. Well, it was that blue cloth, but I didn't want it to be a white table, so I think I'd rather it was a brown table. So I'm going to mix up some brown, and I'm going to fill in the parts of the lace that would be showing through the table, just in a couple spots to give the idea of it. Because the lace is bending, the spots are bending. Some of these have cloth behind instead of table, so they're going to be a little lighter. Before I go too much further on that, I do think I need to do some scrubbing here too to make these ridges softer. So I should have done that before I put in my spots. Softening that whole back edge where the cloth hits the cloth. But see how that softened the cloth and made it look more drapey? Before I can really see what's happening, I need to do my black background some more. Starting with my little brush for this little part here. Now I'm going to take the tape off, and right now it's looking pretty terrible to me, but I've learned over the years that that happens almost with every single painting. There's the hate the painting stage. And when that happens, I put it far away, usually in my windowsill, and I just look at it. Well, I've looked at this a bit and I've realized a couple of things. The biggest thing is that I didn't get the darks into these crystal shapes, and so it's kind of lost a bit of its shape and the idea of crystal. So I'm going to put that back in using several different colors. This flower needs to be pushed back here. And this one has a little shadow right here that makes it stand out in front of the other one. And I'm ready to sign my name.